I was recently asked, I was wondering what secret tips you have as someone who travels frequently for someone like me that doesn't travel hardly ever. Well, today we are going to get into it.
Welcome to the What Could Go Right podcast. We are your hosts, Erik, Orton.
And I'm Emily Orton.
And here we talk about personal growth and sailing. In 2014, we moved aboard a fixer-upper sailboat and bootstrapped a year sailing with our 5 kids, and it changed our lives forever.
We tell the whole story in our memoir, our book, 7 at Sea. On this podcast, we want to help you go from fear to freedom, one adventure at a time. Okay, so this person was asking for secret tips, and we don't want any tips to be secret. We want to share all of our good ideas with you, with as many people as possible, because we want to make it as easy as possible for you to have the most enjoyment as you move through the world, however you want to do that. So this person is going to be traveling, she says transatlantic. So I'm guessing Europe, could be elsewhere, but
the only thing on the other side of the Atlantic is Africa.
Yeah, so she could be going to Africa. I don't know where she's going, but she's going far away, and that's not usually what she does. So I thought today we could share some of our ideas. And I started out by just thinking first of the packing process. And we have a packing list for our sailing trips that can serve as a good foundation for any trip you're taking. It is so important to have a list. And we can just tell you right now, like, it's great to have a list on your way out so you don't forget anything. It's also great to have that list on your way back so you don't leave anything behind on your way home. And maybe we'll mention that again. So first of all, have a packing list. Then I was just thinking about actually traveling there. I don't know if she's taking an airplane or taking a sailboat. I'm assuming an airplane. So
with a Queen Mary.
Yeah, right. So not a sailboat.
A
Pretty
cruise
sure
ship.
she's not. You can, but
you can
I would come the other way.
Yeah, you can take a cruise ship would be another way to get across the Atlantic.
Exactly.
Let's assume she's going to Europe.
I think it's an airplane trip either way. So I just said I would pack light things, that you could use multiple times, that you can layer up as temperatures shift, whether you're indoors, outdoors, or the weather is changing. I would bring snacks for the airplane. I always do, and drink plenty of water because airplanes are dehydrating. And it's easier to, I feel like, handle the jet lag when you stay well hydrated. Just personal opinion. There's no science behind that. But I know one of the things that I like to do on an airplane is I do not like to drink the soda. Soda is also dehydrating. But I like to bring a little bag. Erik loves to have soda.
I love to get dehydrated.
I
hate being comfortable and healthy.
He always makes the flight attendants prepare mixed drinks for him.
I don't make them do anything. They ask me what I want, and I tell them.
And then they give it to you.
I'm like, I would love to have some cranberry and Coke. And they're like, what's that? And I'm like, it's almost like a cherry Coke.
Or they'll say, like, would you like this, or this? And you're like, well, I want this and that mixed together. So it's not like necessarily one of the options, but you can do that. So my first airplane ride, I didn't know that the drinks were included. I think I was like 10 years old, and I was so scared. I didn't have any money. I wasn't traveling with parents. It was just kids traveling together. And like, I think for my first 7 years flying on airplanes, I never accepted any of the flight attendants' offers because I thought it was extra. And
even though you never saw money change hands.
I was scared. I was just scared. So I didn't. But now I know you can have them mix up cranberry juice and anything else. I will often ask for the Bloody Mary mix I don't have the alcoholic beverage, but I just love the spicy tomato juice. So I'll get that, or I'll bring my own bag of tea and say, can I just have some hot water? And then I can sip a warm tea on airplanes, which are usually quite air conditioned. I happen to get a little chilly. If you think you might experience some ear pain either on takeoff or landing, which I don't usually, but sometimes I have, and it's pretty severe. I was traveling, I think, with our 2 little girls when we just had 2 little girls, and I brought some kind of like taffy. I brought Tootsie Rolls. And I told my daughter, this is for your ears, when the plane takes off or is landing, and your ears might hurt. And I didn't explain to her that she was going to put it in her mouth and chew it and be having something to chew, like get that jaw motion going by the ear. And so
I remember
what
this now.
happened is I looked over, she's like, comes to me, she's, next to me, but she's tapping my arm, like crying, and her ears are hurting so much. And she's got these like Tootsie Roll taffy melting in her ears. And I'm like, oh, that is not what I meant. So just to be clear, if you want to take something, you can, bring some gum or some taffy or just yawn. What happened on that occasion when her ears were hurting and she had already stuffed the taffy in her ears, the flight attendant brought one of those hot water cups and put a bunch of hot water into a paper towel and just had this like little hot pocket that we put over the outside of her ear to try to help assuage the pain. I don't think it actually helped, but I think it made her feel that we were trying to help. So that another thing I learned from scuba diving classes is to just plug your nose and blow like you're blowing your nose, but then instead of coming out of your nose or your mouth, the air opposes the pressure in your ears.
Relieves the pressure in your ear.
And it relieves the pressure. So hopefully that's not a secret. Maybe you've already been doing that for years, but I did not know about it until way too late in life. As they say on the socials, I was today years old when I discovered I could fake blow my nose and it would help my ears feel better on a plane. Okay, so this is maybe getting into more of the actual, I've arrived at the location. One of the things Erik and I love to do on the very first day in a new location. Do you want to tell about it?
Sure. I find that you normalize the new environment very quickly. So I like to take pictures on the first day. We like to stay places for longer periods of time. So I don't know if this applies to everybody, but as soon as you see something that looks fun and interesting, take a picture of it, because the second time you see it, not that it will be any less meaningful, but you won't think, oh, I want to remember this. So take pictures on the first day. You're going to capture all the things that stand out to you that are new, interesting, unique.
Mm-hmm. We love to go for a walk whenever you arrive and you're ready to go out the first time, just go for a walk and take pictures of all the little things. Yeah, I love that. Catch your attention.
I actually would say this. After all the airplanes and taxis and trains, and you get to wherever you're staying, I highly recommend the next thing you do once you're feeling rested, whether it's the next morning or that night, go for a walk. Go very slow. Go at a pace where you can pay attention to every little thing in front of you on the sidewalk, or the people's faces that are passing you by. But go for a walk instead of always feeling like you got to jump in a cab or get on a train, because that's always sort of fast-paced and hectic. And there's something very reassuring about going at a walking pace and being able to just leave your home or wherever you're staying, go out, and then come right back to a somewhat now familiar place.
I love that you say that. One of the things that Erik is so great about when we travel is he unpacks immediately. He settles in immediately. And so everything has its place. And I think it's very grounding. And like you said, the more times you return to the same place, the more familiar and comfortable it feels. So even just going out for a walk and then coming back, you're like, okay, this is my new home base.
Even if you just go around the block,
yeah,
or across the street and out a few blocks and then come back, it's nice to come home. Even if you just got there like an hour before.
Yeah. You're like, okay, I'm back. Now I'm in a familiar place. It really is true. It has that psychological effect. We like to say to think about this as your first time in this location. If you're thinking about it as your only time in this location, that could stress you out.
Yes. Yeah. If you think about, I know the temptation to say, oh, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. If you do that, just know that I think you're putting a lot of undue pressure on the situation. Whereas if you say, this is my first time in Rome, or this is my first time in Paris, or this is my first time to the beach, whatever the thing is, just assume that you will have other opportunities to be there and relax a little bit. Because if you try and cram in everything and just go, first of all, it's going to feel hectic. Chances are you're going to not enjoy it as much, and you'll probably make yourself sick in the process. You'll catch a cold or something because you're just pushing yourself too hard. And whereas if you just say, we've been to Paris as a family once, and guess what we missed? The Louvre, because we didn't plan it out very well. And you might talk about this later, but we went and it was closed, and we're like, oh, well, I guess we'll have to see that on our next trip to Paris.
Yeah. And I would say that as one of the tips. If there are things that you want to do, just find out when they're open. We knew that all the museums in New York were closed on Mondays, or the most of them, and just made an assumption, didn't think about it. I was like going midweek to the Louvre, like, oh, we did this and we did that. And we went to Notre Dame and we tried, like, we actually had a really great trip to Paris, and we enjoyed ourselves thoroughly. And we saw lots of things, but we did not ever check the schedule, and we just kind of fit in the things that we wanted and then said, oh, and then we'll go to the Louvre on our last day. And on our last day was Tuesday, the day that it was closed. And so, I mean, I had pre-downloaded an app that was going to take the kids on like a little treasure hunt, scavenger hunt thing through the museum. And that's fine. Well, this was only our first time coming to Paris, and we haven't gone back to Paris with the kids yet, but it just took off so much pressure. Like you say, I think ironically, when you treat it like a once in a lifetime experience, like you'll never have another chance to do any of these things again, and you absolutely have to get it right, or else it can make it less fun. And if you're like, oh, this is my first time, maybe you have some plans, but maybe something will come up, like you meet a really cool street performer who wants to get together and have a chat later, and you're like, yeah, let's do it, And we
speaking from
our time in Paris, and that was one of the really cool things. And we ended up getting his album and hearing his life story. And that was one of the things that made our trip so meaningful. And it was only available on that occasion that we were able to take advantage of it. We were like, oh, this is so cool. Let's meet up with him.
Can I throw out a tip that you reminded me of?
Yeah.
So I was on this sailing trip in Sardinia, and some of our group were going to spend a couple days in Rome after we were done. And they said, what do you recommend? And I recommended a few things. And I was like, also download the Rick Steves tour.
Oh, yeah.
You were talking about downloading a tour. Rick Steves is a guy who he's done tours all over the world, and he knows any major tourist spot. Chances are really good that he's done a tour that you can download on your phone. And instead of hiring a guide there, which may not be a bad way to go, or, kind of paying whatever jacked up tourist rates they have, just put in your earbuds. Or if you're with somebody, you can share earbuds. Or in our case, we had a small group of kids. Emily would connect a Bluetooth speaker, and Rick Steves would just walk us through Pompeii and tell us everything. Like, look down at the streets and you'll notice this about the width of the grooves for the wheels. And look to your left and you'll see this former bathhouse. And it was like we had a personal guide with us, but we just downloaded it and we could go at our own pace. And when the kids needed a break, we'd stop and sit on the curb and eat a snack and drink some water, and then we could keep going. And so having your own mobile tour guide made a lot of those more known destinations a lot more fun.
It made it accessible for us. Yeah. And it was also really fun because he has like these little musical interludes as he's switching gears throughout the guide, and the kids would like make up these dances they would do along with the music. And anyway, yeah, that's a good one. So either way, either get your local person, explore it on your own, or if you want something in between, download the Rick Steves. But you usually do have to actually download it, not just get the app, because you might not have service on location. So
speaking of that, just know that another pro tip for traveling internationally is use WhatsApp. If you don't have WhatsApp you can download it, and you can reach most people internationally through that. Western countries. I've also done it in the, islands and Caribbean and places like that. But but like I'm communicating for this trip to Thailand coming up, and the dive shop is like, if you want to call me, just call me on WhatsApp.
Oh, that surprises me, because a lot of Asia uses Line, and that's what I had heard about Thailand as well. I know it's in Japan and Thailand. I had heard one of the best apps was Line, but if they're on WhatsApp, even easier.
Yeah. So, and then have a good international plan. If you want to keep in touch, it's really helpful to be able to do stuff via Wi-Fi. You don't have to make long distance calls. You can FaceTime or Zoom and not have to, pay for a lot of international minutes. But on most plans, texting is included internationally. And then if you want data, just get an international plan. And I find that it ends up being worth it to just feel comfortable and be able to pull up maps and Google stuff and things
Google
like that.
Translate.
All that.
Google Translate is such an awesome feature. We've talked about it on other episodes, but that one is super helpful if you are getting outside of your comfort zone into maybe countries where you don't speak the language. One of the things that I think is often overlooked is when you do go to the place where you're staying, always put your essential items in the same location. And by essential, I mean your passport, your keys, your room key, your wallet. Put those items in the exact same place every time. In fact, maybe you want to keep them in the exact same pocket of your backpack or in the exact same place in your crossbody bag or whatever you're carrying. But if you, like Erik does, unpack right away and then say, like, here's where we're going to keep the keys while we're in this location at this Airbnb or this hotel or this hostel or this campsite, whatever it is. And that will save you a lot of headache. For me personally, I know there are some locations that I like to travel with a pouch that goes under my shirt to keep my passport and my cash. Places where, like, we've been robbed in London. My family's been robbed in Rome. And I think the interview that we did with the Reeves in a previous podcast, they also got robbed.
Robbed in Rome.
Robbed in Rome. I think that's the name of the podcast.
Lessons from being robbed in Rome.
And they ended up seeing a real positive side to that in, becoming more minimalist, and it saved them tons of time packing from place to place. But if you would like to avoid that lesson and just hear it on the podcast, there are some places where you may consider having a little safety spot for those essentials. I say, this will sound really hypocritical. Maybe Erik should share this tip. Keep your phone charged up.
Oh my goodness. Wow. If you did that, that would be amazing.
Keep your phone charged up and carry a charger pack that is charged up. And on a previous episode, we were talking about going to the places where the kind of people you want to hang out with are hanging out. But we mentioned a recent trip to Moab. And I will say for myself, did you ever once see me run out of juice on that trip?
You were incredible.
Just want to acknowledge I kept my phone charged that entire trip, even though we were at a campsite with no electricity.
Can I throw in an idea here?
Yeah.
We talk about this on the episode where we talk about our packing list for sailing trips. But one of my favorite international travel hacks is I bring one power adapter.
Mm-hmm.
If you may not know exactly what kind of outlets they use in that country, but if you bring one and then you bring in a regular US power strip, you can plug in that one adapter and then plug in your power strip to that and have however many comes on, 4, 5, 6 plug-in outlets and then USB stuff. And so one adapter plus a power strip gives, especially if you're traveling with a family or a group and you want to have lots of ways to charge multiple devices, that's a really easy one.
Yeah, I love that tip. That has been awesome for us, because even if you're traveling alone, you might be like, oh, I want to charge my drone and I want to charge my GoPro and I want to charge my phone and I want to
for us
charge my
people.
laptop. And yeah, so that is a great one, because you're like, oh my gosh, which thing are they using here? And I have to pay $15 to $20 for every single adapter. Adds up. Okay, so I love that one. We talked about making a packing list so that you don't forget. And, we have our packing list that we're happy to share with you. I just want to say this is an awesome use for ChatGPT. If you say, hey, I'm going to this location for this long at this time of the year, and I think I'm going to be doing these kind of activities, will you generate a packing list for me? And then you can run through it and see, oh, they forgot chapstick or whatever. And then, anyway, I love using that to help me think of what I might need on my packing list and then refining it.
I have multiple packing lists depending on which kind of trip I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually a little bit proud of myself when last week we were going to Moab and I Googled I just looked up packing lists on my computer, and I have a Moab/Indian Creek packing list.
So it wasn't like, oh, you Googled it and someone else had created it. This was one you had previously made for yourself.
Like I have a sailing trip packing list. I have a rock climbing trip packing list. I have a keynote speaking packing list. And the point is to just take 10, 15 minutes in advance when you're not rushing to get your bag zipped up and you're not rushing to get to the airport, and just say, what are the situations that I think I'm going to be in? What do I want that's going to make me feel comfortable and well prepared? And just jot all of them down. And you'd be surprised things that you think of. Like, I probably should have taken my rain pants
Oh
on
yeah.
this last trip, and I didn't.
It said it wasn't going to rain as much as
Anyway,
it did.
but just think through the possible situations that you might be in, and you'll say, oh, you know what? I actually really should bring fingernail clippers. Always carry fingernail clippers.
that should be on your packing list.
Little things like that. Or like, oh, you know what? I should bring the charge cord for my phone, because oftentimes you don't, because you always have it in your car or you have it at your house. But when you're on the go, you should have it on your person.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So anyway, just create a packing list in advance, or chat GPT, or together with the AI world, you can figure it out.
And, if you get out there and you realize there was something that you missed, add it. You can always be refining that. It's like a living document.
And it is a living document. And I'll say this, a lot of the things that you need, you can get where you're going. They use toothpaste in Italy. They use deodorant in England, I think. They use, whatever item you might, oh, you know what? I need gum, or you know what? I actually need a shirt, or whatever it is. Chances are pretty good you can get it there. And sometimes it's kind of a fun local adventure to be like, oh, I forgot my toothbrush. I'm going to go venture into the store and find one. And then you have a souvenir that is not going to be branded, but it's going to remind you of that time that you were in England or Spain or wherever, and that's your Spanish toothbrush.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can say, I'm only going to bring 2 changes of shirts, and I know I'm going to want to buy something there, and this will just make space. Then I'll fill out my outfit. Anyway, pack as much or as little as you want, but I recommend packing as light as you feel comfortable packing, because really it's just more stuff for you to be responsible for when you really want to just be enjoying where you are. Let's see. Oh yeah. And the packing list, like we said, comes in handy on the other way as well. We had a tragedy in our family recently where Erik was leaving a boat in a hurry, and one item got left behind.
A GoPro.
It was the GoPro camera.
Sorry.
And yeah, exactly. And it had the pictures from diving in underwater caves and all these beautiful memories they had made on that trip. I think you were in the Bahamas, and it was very sad. I think you called the base 5 times. We knew someone else who was sailing out of there as well, had him check the same boat. Like, you did everything you could to try to retrieve it immediately. And guess what? Not retrieved. So if it had been on your list, you would have gone, oh yeah, I know where that is, and like grabbed it.
Yeah, your packing list can double as your repacking list. Just check things off when you're headed home and make sure you have everything that you brought with you before you leave wherever you are.
You almost never forget anything, but when you do, it's usually something that makes you really sad. The only other one I can think of is that kind of wool and possum.
Oh, I had like a neck scarf thing that I got in New Zealand, and
you left it in Patagonia, Chile, and could never get it back again.
The Airbnb host was like, "Oh yeah, I'll mail it to you."
No,
never happened.
He will not mail it to you. So don't count on that. Okay. All right. One of the things that I would say is that time seems to expand when you are in a new place. The days will feel so long because so much of what is happening is new. So just be aware of that. And you'll feel like you're always going to remember everything, but it's super helpful if you just, even if you're not a journal keeper, you put a note on your phone, or maybe as you take photos, it'll track it. But just make sure you get the location, like the date you went and the location where you were. And your brain can probably rebuild the rest of it from there. But you might be like, oh, I forgot. What was that little town? I can't even remember what that little town was called. What day did we go to that little town? It's one with the cheese factory, and you just write it down.
One of the things that I do at the end of our sailing trips, because people are always like, where did we go again? What was the name of the place? Is I don't do this every time, but I have done it, is I'll just have whoever wants to look over my shoulder and I'm going to pull out a map and I'm just going to point to where we went and I'm going to name it. And they just video me talking through it.
Oh,
And then they
yeah.
have a record of, okay, we were there and this is what it was called. And then they can always review that video and write it down, transcribe it, or connect the dots on a map of their own. And it's a good feeling, I think, to leave a country and to know where you were, to know the names of it, where and what led to what, to what, to what.
Yeah. There have been times when there are places that we've traveled repeatedly that we've created a little map brochure, and it has like a map on the front, and then it has each day, and you can just write, here are the locations we were. And if you want to add any notes about it, it just says day 1, day 2, day 3. That's something that is super helpful. Yeah, because you might not remember everything later. It turns into a little bit of a blur. For me, I would say just really enjoy yourself and give yourself a little extra time. Expect that you're going to get lost, or that you're going to maybe take a side road because something there was intriguing to you and you wanted to explore it. Give yourself a little space between planned events, and that will make it easier for you to actually like enjoy it. And I just love seeing this incredible world that God has created for us and meeting all of his children who live everywhere in it. And I think my final tip that I have in mind right now is just moving in gratitude will reduce stress and increase your stamina. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later this month. But those are my travel tips from the top of my head. Do you have anything else?
There's so much more to add, but I think gratitude is like the crowning jewel of as you travel. Just be grateful to be there. Be grateful to experience the new things and see the new things, meet the new people. It's one of the great luxuries of life.
And even the mishaps become delightful stories
If you're grateful,
if you're grateful. What could go right?
What could go right? Hey guys, it's Erik. Before we sign off today, I just wanted to share with you 2 things. First of all, I want to share with you some thoughts, some takeaways from the folks that actually joined us on our Sardinia trip. So at the end of the next few podcasts, I'm going to be sharing some clips directly from them. Also, we've had some shifts in our January sailing trips to the Virgin Islands. 2 trips. Each one has had 1 cabin's worth of people have to shift to another time. So January 20th through the 25th, we now have 1 cabin available for 2 people if you want to join us on that trip. Also, if you want to join us January 27th through February 1st, 2 folks also had to switch, so now there's a cabin available on that trip. So the last 2 weeks of January, if you want to stay on the British Virgin Islands, it's a beautiful time of year. It's 85 degrees, sunny, windy, like good sailing wind. So anyway, if you're interested in that, email me at hello@theawesomefactory.nyc, or you can DM me on Instagram, or just go to our website /sailing, and you can click up a time to speak directly. Anyway, I'd love to welcome you aboard. So what was something that maybe you were worried about, or that was different than, like, you had an expectation and it was different than what you expected?
I think I expected my cabin to not be as nice as it was. I was very comfortable in my cabin.
What was it? Anything that you learned or that you feel like you're taking home as a takeaway?
I can sail. I loved the sailing part when Susan and I were up front, and I don't need to be afraid of that. I thought that we might come through some really rough waters and be really scared of falling off the boat or something. So, and it was just an amazing trip. I'll never forget it. And you were the best captain ever.
Oh, you're very kind. You're very kind.
Easygoing.
If you were to pick 2 words to describe it, what comes to mind?
Awesome. And super.
All right. Super and awesome. Awesome and super. Love it. All right, Jay, how about you?
You're gonna have the same one.
So I guess let's see. I think that
Super duper, yeah.
this trip has totally exceeded my expectations. The boat is amazing. The captain was amazing. I guess if I was a little worried about anything, it would be how throwing 8 people from different places in the country together and to see how they would meld and work together, and the crew was amazing. It's just we all seem to just work well together, and whether it was working on deck or working in the kitchen, it seemed like we were able to function pretty dang decently as a crew sailing this boat. So I thought that was pretty good. What else?
2 words to describe
So
it.
my 2 words would be it was fulfilling and satisfying.
All right.
Yeah.
That's high praise. Appreciate that, Jay.